This is ClueCon Weekly, the official Free Switch web show produced and broadcasted directly from Free Switch. ClueCon Weekly features live updates from the Free Switch developers and presentations from various pioneers of communications technology. ClueCon Weekly is brought to you by Free Switch Solutions, the official consulting firm of the Free Switch open source project. Get help from the experts. Visit freeswitch.com. ClueCon, the premier technology conference for telecom, WebRTC, IoT, and all things maker. ClueCon is held every year in Chicago, Illinois, and offers an all-day hackathon and 4 days of technology-rich presentations from developers around the world. Learn more at ClueCon.com or call 877-748-CLUE.
All right, guys, welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Today is January the 11th, and we'll have Daniel from the Kamailio project joining us shortly. For you guys that are not familiar with Kamailio, it is a open source SIP proxy and has a lot of cool features. So Daniel will be joining us here shortly to talk about that and some cool stuff going on in the world of Kamailio. Before we get to that, Mr. West, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. So just trying to get some things worked out here. Working on making sure the fact stuff in 1.6.14 is as solid as can be. That's pretty much what Anthony and I have been working on for the last few weeks. I've written test cases, committed those. They're actually in the testing repo now. Over the next few weeks, I'll probably have a few more cases as they crop up. If anybody has any issues with faxing, please let me know. Get me a JIRA file. I need packet captures and logs. All of these things will help me make it even better. So that's pretty much the bulk of what I'm working on right now.
All right, cool. Well, thanks, Brian. And Miss Kathleen, how are you doing today, ma'am?
I'm doing really well, Ken. Thank you. We had some wonderful work done this week, and the release notes for the new release can be found at freeswitch.org, for those of you interested. And then ClueCon 2017 registration is open. We have opened early registration to accommodate those of you that like to get signed up early. Keep in mind, our early bird discount ends on January 31st. This discount gets you a ticket for only $6.99, so act fast, sign up. And then flights on Virgin Atlantic from London to Chicago for the week of ClueCon are only $856 right now. So book early, save some money. Those of you that like to wait till the last minute, you can save a little bit of money there by booking a little bit earlier. And then we're moving the bug hunt and the Friday free-for-all to noon Central Time. That way you only have one time and a place to remember to join the Free Switch team. So keep that in mind. Mark your calendars. That's Tuesdays for the bug hunt and Friday for the Friday free-for-all at noon Central Time. And then we have one more opening in February for ClueCon Weekly on the 15th. So if you'd like to join us as a guest right here on ClueCon Weekly, let us know ASAP. They are filling it very fast. We have a full schedule from January all the way through February and starting into March. So hurry up and let us know if you or someone you'd like to see on ClueCon Weekly. And I think that's it for me, Ken.
All right, cool. Thank you very much, Kathleen. And as Brian and Kathleen alluded to, we here with the core team, we're proud to announce that FreeSwitch 1.6.14 is up and available. Release notes are available at freeswitch.org. Packages for Debian, Ubuntu, all the various things, RPMs for Red Hat, and for the first time in a long time, Windows release. So you can find all those, the downloads for that at files.freeswitch.org. There's links in the release notes on freeswitch.org. Just scroll down on the homepage there. You'll see that down there. And you can get that stuff. Go download it today. All the at the last check, all the CDN mirrors are updated. So you guys can get it through the normal locations. Or if you're tracking it in Git, just grab the 1.6.14 tag from the 1.6 branch, and you'll get that. So that's up and running. So thanks for all the guys that helped test that, and Brian and Tony and Mike and all their hard work in getting that stuff, getting all the code changes done there. So you guys go check that out, and we'll keep it rolling on there. So this week we're going to have Daniel from Kamailio joining us. If you guys don't know Daniel, he's been around the open source VoIP community for a very, very long time. He's got a crazy amount of experience in the SIP protocol and SIP proxies and how all that stuff goes together. So we're going to bring him on here and just let him tell a little bit more about himself and his background. And I know he's got some cool stuff that he wants to talk about today. So Daniel, how are you doing, sir?
Oh, hi. Thanks, Ken. Doing well. A bit winter here in Berlin, but I guess everyone in the Northern Hemisphere is facing the same problem. Otherwise, yeah, starting 2017 at full speed, you already did a release. We are also planning a release for Kamailio very soon, a major one labeled 5.0. The first version in that release series is going to be 5.0.0, as we use a 3-number release versioning policy. Yeah, indeed, it's been a long journey to get here in this VoIP. As you mentioned, I'm now over 15 years playing with SIP mainly and focusing on signaling. Thanks to guys like FreeSwitch team, I don't have to bother with media processing because I just install FreeSwitch or other application whenever I need to provide a full telephony service. For those that are new here and they haven't heard of Kamailio or they don't really know what's a proxy about, so we deal only with SIP messages, with signaling, so we don't really process any media packets, no matter it's audio, video, desktop sharing, whatsoever. We can forward them as part of a NAT traversal solution. Still a lot of IPv4 around, right? Otherwise, for any media processing like storing for voicemail, IVR, conferencing like here, we'll need to pair with an application like FreeSwitch. And everything works fine as these two applications use SIP as a protocol. We'll be discussing for quite some time tight integration with FreeSwitch and Kamailio, eventually using or bypassing SIP as a control protocol. Maybe we'll get there, but I guess each side was busy on building more, let's say, attractive or more demanding features like you guys did with this amazing web conferencing system and WebRTC. The plan for today would be a short number of slides presenting what one should expect from Kamailio version 5.0, and afterwards having more like an open discussion about Kamailio and FreeSwitch or real-time communication in general. I wrote a couple of tutorials in the past how Kamailio and FreeSwitch can be put together in a platform, acting with FreeSwitch as an endpoint media server or acting as a back-to-back user agent for the topology hiding, so looping the call through FreeSwitch and using Kamailio as signaling processing for the registration, authentication, and so on. Of course, one of the typical use cases for Kamailio is deploying it as a load balancer. So whenever you have a large volume of calls that you need to handle through FreeSwitch, specifically for, I don't know, maybe terminating to PSTN or transcoding, Kamailio suits very well to load balance across a farm of free switches. So this would be the introduction from my side. Probably the best would be to take the questions at the end of the slides. prepared. But if you really have something important to ask and you think it's relevant for that moment, I don't really mind being interrupted. There could be some delays. I'm calling in from Berlin, Germany, and I notice in the preparation that sometimes I see a bit of a delay between video and audio, so I might not hear immediately, so could get into some desynchronization of conversation. It's why I said maybe questions at the end. So I have some slides around that I could start with the new version of Kamailio. So actually the state right now is that we close the development of new features for the upcoming version, the major version 5.0. As a typical release schedule in our side, once the development is frozen, we continue with testing for 1 month. Then we create a branch and we still do a bit of testing, maybe 1-2 more weeks in the branch, and then we'll do the final stable release from the branch. Later, from the same branch will be patch releases, so we increment the latest numbers. It's going to be like 5.0, 0.1, 0.2, and so on. We maintain stable releases for about 2 years, and typically the last 2 stable branches are maintained, not to put the pressure to update every 10, 12 months as we do major releases. This presentation actually started a bit from the last Kamailio World Conference, as last year we celebrated 15 years of development for Kamailio project. Again, for those that are new to the environment of Kamailio, the project started in a research institute back in 2001 in Berlin, Germany. It was released open source 1 year later, having quite complete functionality for running VoIP service routing SIP server. And focusing on scalability from the beginning and processing only SIP signaling, it get quite popular on this kind of use cases. Again, signaling processing. The name of the project at that time was SIP Express Router, which then, due to some acquisition of the IPR by different companies, we had to create a fork, OpenSCR, and later rename it to Kamailio due to another issue, a trademark issue with a US company, which meanwhile went out of business. They were not related to the project at all. They had some other product still related to the telephony. So when we decided to change the major number in release version, because the current one is starting with 4, we look a bit back and 15 years of development, probably free switch developers can also assert that over the years you get a quite big backlog of code that sometimes you don't know if anyone is using. You are a bit afraid of removing it because being lazy, sometimes you'll need to run a lot of tests to see if it's any relevant impact. But anyhow, we decided that it's time to a bit of a cleanup, but also analyze what are the current needs for real-time communications from our perspective as being a SIP routing proxy. And at least myself, I identified 4 eras in the evolution of the project. So at the beginning, when the development of even VoIP as a market was, quite incipient and no big demands on being interoperable or integrating with third-party services. We had quite static, configuration. Everything was in a single file, no variables. It was just okay. I get a call, I authenticate, I see where it's going to another user or to PSTN and send out. In a few years, the VoIP market grew and more applications were available to integrate with and interoperate. So we had to be a bit more dynamic in the configuration file, accept different headers, sometimes in a invalid format, fix it. So we had to add more functionality on managing and mangling the SIP packets. As companies were growing with the market and more of the old telephony companies were switching to IP, even we had a quite good scalability on processing SIP traffic, we started to feel the need of becoming more asynchronous in processing signaling, being it like integration with prepaid engine, so querying if the user still has credit, if it's allowed to call to that destination, and so on. We needed to park the invite and then handle other SIP traffic until getting a response from the billing engine, from the prepaid engine. Bear in mind that proxy is not a back-to-back user agent, so it's never answering the call and then can wait for longer. Everything has to be done in a rather short time anyhow, but still you don't really want to stay blocked for 10 seconds or even less, 1 second, 2 seconds waiting for an answer from another application. Also, it was an increase on secure communication with instant messaging and presence. So TLS became important, and having a good asynchronous TLS layer was very important. In the last few years, as all the other were pretty much established into the application in terms of scalability, parsing SIP packets, the classic use cases, list close routing, load balancing, and also with the evolution of the overall internet communication channels, which were no longer related to VoIP telephony. So we had all this instant messaging, but also other applications like, near real-time communication, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. We had to switch also more into API-based routing and going this way with beyond telephony services. So now we are looking at apps, and there are 3 layers that form the creation of an app or are relevant for an application. So we have the document, the data that you need to get and process, understand. Then the transport between the application and the control of the two, deciding where you want to go from Kamailio with the SIP request. So in terms of the document, JSON became quite popular, but then also XML is still quite used in many applications. So we have now in our configuration file, which is like a scripting language, the tools that gives you fine-grained access to elements of such documents. And of course, there are other serialization tools that you can get, like parsing comma-separated values or parameter like strings, name equal value, followed by semicolon and another set of such attributes. Also, a good focus was on the transports. So HTTP, HTTPS, we already had a good implementation because it was required for the simple extension for the instant messaging and presence from the ITF to manage the contact list via XCAP protocol. But then also integration with mobile application was a target, and JSON RPC proved to be simple enough to use it as transport of information between Kamailio and other application. And then the control in the configuration file, we have this scripting language, which maybe guys like me and some other that have a good experience with programming are getting easier, either by experience like me or because they are familiar with programming. But then always we faced issues with newcomers coming and asking what kind of operation can do in our interpreter for the configuration file language, which kind of libraries for the yesterday released NoSQL server it can use, and so on. Kamailio itself, it's written in C, and practically you can extend it by writing a module for connecting to your new system in C, but it's no longer that easy to find C developers. And because of that, we sort of allowing other languages to be used for writing C routing rules. We already had some embedded interpreters that could be used in the configuration file by executing a function and saying, okay, run that Lua script, and in Lua we exported some new module specific with Kamailio internal functions, but still everything had to be written like routing logic in our native language. And we practically developed for the 5.0 what we call as Kamailio embedded interface. So this is a layer that allows selecting the language you want to use for writing the configuration file, what we call routing blocks. So we still have some native configuration that it's required there, and it's practically those controlling the global parameters that you have to tell Kamailio what modules it has to load, where to listen on, like IP port, how many processes to create. But these are like, very simple name equal value statements, and they don't really need to be changed at runtime. Or to mention that one of the requested feature was, okay, I want to do a small change in the routing logic. Can I do it without restarting Kamailio? That was not possible, and it's still not with the native interpreter, because we do some pre-compilation at startup, which practically creates a lot of direct linking to memory pointers and so on, targeting optimization for performance. But with a new configuration interface, we allow this, and it's right now possible if you use Lua or JavaScript as configuration language. Besides these two, we have also support for Python. Practically, Lua and Python were in Kamailio for several years. I think I added Lua in 2008. Someone added Python more or less around the same date. And this JavaScript was added very recently in the past few weeks. It was more like having one written from scratch. I did it, which actually doesn't have an external dependency. So the entire interpreter, it's embedded. It's using duct tape JavaScript interpreter. A tiny one, and could be useful as an example for creating another a module that allows writing configuration file in a different language. Because the Lua and Python, they still have the old code, which is not related to the configuration language, but executing from the native Kamailio CFG scripts in Lua or Python. So they're a bit bigger with code not really related to configuration file engine. Now, to understand the difference, if you are familiar with the old Kamailio config language, here it's a comparison of the what we call native versus Lua. So practically we have these routing blocks. And we have request route, the block that is executing whenever Kamailio receives a request. So you get an invite to Kamailio, practically it starts executing this action in the request route. And then it's, in this example, it's practically executing some subroutes like route reckon it, route not detect, then some condition on cancel and so on. So still kind of modularity support we had also in the old native language. In Lua, there are some predefined as well functions that you have to write. Will be KSR request route with underscores, and then you'll have to execute any kind of Lua statements. We export to Lua a module, KSR uppercase, and there you get access to a large set of functions from Kamailio code. So you can still use functions from TM module, from list code routing, load balancing. That's not a problem. What this embedded interpreters offers first would be, again, this reloading with Lua. You can change the script and then you tell to Kamailio to reload it, and everything should be fine. The reload happens next time when a process is handling a request. And as you can see, because I wrote the equivalent of the native, they are pretty much in pair. With a mention that here, for example, KSR route reckon it, it's a Lua function. It has to be written in Lua. It's no longer something predefined. It's you choosing the name. I use KSR route reckon it to be suggestive here, but you can use anything you want. It's no longer only the equivalent of the request route has to be KSR request route and the equivalent of the reply route, which are the main entry points of executing actions for a request or a reply. Everything else like failure route or branch route, it's up to you to choose the name. You will just have to provide their name as parameters to some other functions, and they will be called back when those events are happening. Here it's like another or part of the same example to see what was a subroute in the old configuration file, the route not detect, and then on the right side, the equivalent in the Lua, again using the KSR module exported by Kamailio to Lua interpreter. And then you can see, because it's more or less the same functionality, it's practically executing functions from Kamailio code, but you can add in between, any kind of Lua code. You can load your Lua modules, any kind of Lua library, you can load it inside the Lua script, totally independent of Kamailio, because it's the Lua interpreter doing everything. The example with Python, for the Python, I'm not that much familiar with Python, to be honest. I just added a Chemi layer to it because Python was there, so adding was not a difficulty. The difference would be that Python, it's object-oriented, and then here you have to define a class for like an object related to Kamailio processing. Inside it, again, you need to define some methods for that class, and the object will be initiated by Kamailio module, and then we'll execute this method KSR request route within the Kamailio object in this case. KSR stands for Kamailio SIP routing, if anyone was wondering what that means. So this would be one of the major new features. It will be up to you to choose which scripting language you want to build the SIP routing logic. More about Kamailio 5.0 in summary, just to cut it shorter now. So first, okay, embedded interpreters. It was these previous slides. Then restructuring the source code tree. If anyone had the curiosity to look at the Kamailio source tree in the past, there were a lot of C code file in the root folder. It was not easy to browse that and spot where are the modules, internal libraries, and other resources. So we decided to relocate and have a better structure of the tree. Starting from root, we put everything that is related to the source of Kamailio in SRC, with further subfolders for core, modules, libraries. Additional tools and examples and config files are also out of the source tree, but in subfolders of the root. And then it was a good chance with also relocation to remove some duplicate code or unmaintained code. A big part was what we called management interface, and we had this control tool for Kamailio, ChemCTL, which was using management interface to interact with Kamailio, so sending all these commands to reload the dispatcher module or to reload the list code routing records. But we had also an RPC. MI was added at the beginning of SIP Express Router back in 2001, 2002. Was initially very basic text-based protocol with commands and parameters per line. Later, there was an adaptation for XML RPC, but it was facing a lot of issues when providing parameters that had to be a multi-line value. For example, providing a set of SIP headers. That the text-based protocol had some issues on handling that. In parallel, we developed an RPC-oriented communication protocol, and after several years, it was the time to remove the MI and stick only to the RPC. So with 5.0, there are a couple of modules which disappeared everything that had like an MI in the name were related to this management code. Also, we had a bunch of new features, among them 6 new modules. AppJSDT is this JavaScript interpreter using duct tape framework. No external dependencies, so doesn't require installing other libraries than the standard libc. Some extension to the IMS for online charging services, message queuing, NSQ, and RabbitMQ extension, module to handle or at least parse SS7 packets, get a JSON format of it, and then with another module from Kamailio you can inspect the attributes in the SS7 packet. We have a module that gives you JSON path capabilities, so setting values in a JSON document is very easy from Kamailio configuration file. There are some links there for anyone that wants to explore more about what's new and how an upgrade from current stable to the development can be done. They are not really fully written. There's still a lot of things to add there, but you can watch in the next few weeks. They should get proper content there. For the KEM, if anyone wants to look at more complete examples, so practically we have this Kamailio basic configuration file that gives you authentication, location, traversal, a bunch of other features. Here are the links in our repository where you can see for each this new configuration scripting languages, Lua, Python, JSDT. So you can compare and practically you can see the complexity is more or less the same, but the benefits would be ability to use any kind of extension in Lua and Python plus reloading again. And I'm ending here. Again, if someone wants to ask more questions, can jump now in. Before ending, of course, a short mention about our event, Kamailio World, that's going to be in May, again in Berlin. Last year we had also some of the ClueCon guys, including Catherine there. We hope to see more and more, and Giovanni was there. It's an event not only focusing on Kamailio, but also application that can be integrated with Kamailio. You can look more on the website to get a proper feeling of what can be at that event. And now we can discuss about Kamailio FreeSwitch. Any questions you have, or a topic that you want me to speak more about? Just
All right.
say
So,
it.
yeah, I'll go ahead and ask something here, Daniel. So, with Kamailio, you mentioned that when you deploy it with FreeSwitch, you typically see that used as like a load balancer in there. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how Kamailio handles load and handles that load balancing stuff?
Yep. So there are, let's say, two types of traffic now in the public internet. We have the good traffic from your customer, from your devices, and then we have also bad traffic from scanners that try to penetrate your system. And typically, when they hit your system, it's way more traffic than the good one. So then you can put Kamailio in front of a free switch farm first with the good purpose of load balancing across free switch, because maybe one of the free switch needs to go into maintenance mode, updating libraries and deploying a new version of free switch. You can use Kamailio with the dispatcher module. And I think Giovanni had a presentation at ClueCon 2 years ago when I attended, but also at some events, just to mention him as he's present here. And with dispatcher module, you can even decide what kind of balancing algorithm you want to do. A typical one would be round robin, but you can also select among weight-based distribution. So if you have a more powerful system, you can say I want 80% to go to this system, 20% to the other system. You can disable nodes in the free switch farm, so the dispatcher module will no longer use them until you activate. Also, call load distribution. Kamailio will keep a list of active calls per each free switch node and will select the one with the least number of active calls. And then we have other algorithms that could be useful in different situations. We call them hashing algorithms. So we compute a hash over an attribute of the C message, like call ID or from URI to URI. And based on it, we select a free switch node. The hashing algorithms have the property that for the same input value, like when it's the same from URI, the same free switch node will be used. So no matter I send a register or I send an invite, if the from URI is Daniel at Kamailio.org, will end up to the same free switch. So there are some good properties here that if you want to send all the traffic going to a user, you hash over the request URI. If you want to send all the traffic specific for the caller, you do the hashing on from URI. For the bad traffic, we have also some modules that you can use to filter out that traffic. You don't really want to hit your farm, which is doing media processing with invalid attempts of calls. Among them, we have Pike. This one can track the number of requests per second from an IP address. And you can put some limits, and you can alert on when a limit is exceeded. So if you just have telephone devices connecting to you, they can't really send more than 20 requests per second, maybe 100 requests per second. But an attacker typically sends way more. Then, of course, any kind of rules to check content of the SIP message is quite trivial with Kamailio, like checking the user agent, and you can see friendly scanner. You can drop it from there if it's just a stupid kiddie scanner there. Then checks over the username format and so on. You can also detect, is your users are having IDs or phone numbers starting with a specific prefix. You should be able to test that very easily and reject everything else. Rejecting could mean like drop or sending a reply. It's also a matter of your decision. We have also GeoIP extensions. So based on the source IP of the SIP signaling, you can take action in Kamailio. So if you act only in the US market, you can see, okay, this is a registration coming out of US. You are a fixed line operator. There should not be anything good with the invite coming or registration coming from Nigeria or I don't know, other countries. Pipe limit, it's also useful. Pike, which I mentioned before, it's more for, tracking per IP, but sometimes they do distributed attacks. And with pipe limit, you can group types of traffic and then again have a limit, like, overall number of registration per second, no matter the IP address. Again, taking a decision like dropping, sending a reply, or triggering an alert, it's a matter of what you write in the config file. It's nothing done implicitly in the code. So a lot of these extensions are used in different stages. Okay, the number of registration goes above, 10,000 per second. Maybe it was a network down, and now it's a wave of registration. You first send an alert, you keep a flag in our share memory where you can use hash table, for example, and then later, if you see it's keep going like that, you can start blocking. We have tools like or extension function that allows you to do like random rejection of the calls, or packets, not calls, would be registration. So based on that function, some traffic is allowed, some traffic it's not allowed. We can also reject traffic requesting to re-register a bit later. Think about this: network is down, then you face like a tsunami of registration. You have, let's say, 1 million users. For whatsoever reason, data center was down. You are back in 10 minutes, but then a lot of devices will just register at once. It's not about the thing that maybe your platform is not able to handle 1 million registration per second. Is you don't really want to keep that forever, to see like, tsunami coming every 10 minutes, the expiration time. And then you can, send randomly to these devices, well, you register it back in 30 seconds, in 2 minutes, and so on. Even the re-registration interval can be different. More on the protection would be also tracking active calls, and here you can group using dialog module per user. So like Daniel at Kamailio.org can have only one active call at a time. Someone else can have more, or you can group by destination. Doesn't have to be the full number. You can extract the prefix, the identification of the group. It's up to you. They are called profiles in the dialog module, and say there cannot be more than 10 calls to an expensive destination. I don't know, satellite numbers or Cuba or Nigeria, whatever. It's expensive. More than that, you can put different maximum duration. So let's say a call to an expensive destination, you can say cannot last more than 10, 20 minutes. If it's within your network, can last forever because it doesn't cost money. So maybe with this one, I make it a bit clear for people not familiar with Kamailio that the application is actually a framework. Kamailio, it's more a framework. It's a toolkit providing a set of modules that you put together and you decide the action to be taken.
I would like something to what Daniel was explaining so much well and in detail. But if someone is not really aware of Kamailio, you can think that FreeSwitch like Apache, and Kamailio is a mix of HA proxy and IP tables. So you can use Kamailio for security, load balancing, and anti-denial of service, and you can have it in front. And because it's a completely different kind of application, is so light that it can handle millions of calls with just one machine or two machines in high availability, and with very little expenses. So paying just for two little machines, you secure your entire farm of very big machines. So it's from a point of view of what I buy with Kamailio. Kamailio give you security and peace of mind, and is not like I will put another same kind of thing in front. So let's say I have one free switch that then balance to many other free switch. No, Kamailio is very, very, very light because it do another thing, and so you just pay for a little machine to secure a very big farm on the back. That is let's say 1 million miles view of relation between Kamailio and free switch.
Yeah, that's good details added here. So yeah, practically making the difference between like IP packets forwarding, but think about SIP packets forwarding, and other application servers for SIP, where they really need to understand the full context, like, you know, conferencing servers or voicemail or IVR systems. We don't really care whether it's gonna be like a call for audio video or it's just a registration and so on. We treat packets as a SIP message. Later, of course, we can add also layers, like with the dialog module, we track between the invite and the buy. But again, it's a matter of the config file.
Speaking of the config file, Daniel, one of the questions that I get the most, and I think it kind of relates back to what you were talking about using other languages, is why you use scripting in a config file? And I think you can address that pretty quickly.
Yep, the initial developers were not really telecom guys, so we were not thinking as routing just telephones by prefix and numbers. And actually, it was an attempt in the very first days of having like a regular expression-based routing config file, but it proved to be not that flexible. The issue maybe is from the point of view of why a custom language, because that's practically you need to develop a language first, and then you need to develop the SIP extension for that language, the SIP functions. And that's where we actually face the difficulty, because there are people willing to do complex operation, you know, let's think like, I don't know, doing logarithms. Nobody asked it, but just giving a stupid example. You need to implement it in C, export it from Kamailio module, while these languages already have it. But back in 2001, the scripting languages were not that fast to be suitable for real-time communication at the performance we wanted. And by writing our own one, we could do the optimization we wanted, and practically that also adds the limitation of not being able to easily reload the native Kamailio CFG. I think over the time, again, with what I explained at the beginning of the slides, everyone faced this issue with getting more dynamic and having a need for more like API-oriented interaction with everything else. So I think the scripting language, and actually Lua I was getting inspired from the free switch, because free switch had the support of Lua, and then I thought, oh, this looks cool when I added back in 2008. So frees us as Kamailio developers on writing extensions which are not related to SIP. We still need to export like functions SIP related to Lua interpreter. We don't need to export like a connector or library for sending Twitter notification for missed calls, right? That you can get in Python in Lua very easily.
Yeah, cool. So does anybody else have any questions for Daniel? Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away. And yeah, while we're go ahead.
Michael, I
Hey.
saw there was, sorry, I saw there was a different where access 7 options. Is that different from the 15 stuff, or is that?
We cannot understand. Maybe
Yeah, we can barely hear you.
Chat.
Are you on a speakerphone? I think he's calling in from his cell in a bad location.
Yeah, I couldn't understand anything.
Yeah,
I was hoping that someone could repeat eventually, but it's why I haven't said anything.
Well, let's see if he'll IM one of us or text one of us, and then we'll translate that question there, Jersey Mike. But or is that him? But yeah. So if anybody else has any questions, go ahead and pop this up. I just want to reiterate, kind of like what Giovanni was saying about the performance of Kamailio. I've used the project all the way back since the SIR and OpenSIR days, and I can tell you that a little bit of hardware goes a long way, especially when load balancing and front ending, out to customers or even carriers with Kamailio. On the between the carrier and FreeSwitch, you can have a ton of FreeSwitch boxes sitting behind Kamailio running on some pretty insignificant hardware or a small VM. So you see us deployed quite often together. So check it out there. And if you have any questions, now's your time to get them on in here.
I would like to ask a question because nobody is asking. Daniel, how you see the impact of WebRTC into the, let's say, the communication traffic? For your point of view, that is very, very qualified, is picking up speed? I mean, it begins to make volumes. Is something real, this WebRTC thing, or it just a fade?
Well, it is real, and actually for things like what we do now as conference calls, it's very important, and I think it's where the most of its market is going to be. There are some markets that will benefit of WebRTC, but I don't see it happening. I don't expect happening because it's where the companies don't really want to have a easy interaction, and here I'm referring to support. I hope that a lot of companies will switch to WebRTC for being easy to be contacted. But if you think of what it's typically used now, let's say for mobile operators, they give you a support number, you call there, and you have to navigate through 100 IVR options because they don't want you to connect with them. So actually WebRTC is facilitating this, but in that case, I don't see it happening because it would be easier to explain. Like here, sharing the desktop and showing the problem would be not a very easy thing to do. What I think is going to happen a bit more would be in e-commerce, online sites. When buying something and you have some questions, given the context communication that WebRTC brings in, that would be quite useful. So the person on the call center already knows that maybe you are looking at a laptop and now you want to buy some headsets or whatsoever that are working the best with it. In terms of business for telephony companies, probably it's not gonna be advertised directly. The benefits might be secure communication, but I don't think there will be services that will rely on people having a browser open. They still need to provide either like a phone device or some, app, but maybe using the WebRTC technology for encryption and quality of audio video. Then will be the companies, and it was the drive force behind WebRTC, the companies that actually don't earn revenue from communication, like Google with Hangouts. They wanted to just connect people, but not charging, getting a financial revenue from other sources like advertising and so on. So to summarize it, I think WebRTC, it's a great technology. It's just gonna have different paths for what used to be like classic telephony and internet communication, where one is charging by minute, relies on low cost device sitting there and being able to contact you at any time, and internet where it's more on demand. I want to join the conference, I start the browser, I call in, we end this, I'm going to have the dinner, but I'm going to shut down the browser for this. There are different types of revenues, and I think both of them have a good future.
Thanks a lot, Daniel.
Welcome. Anything else? Of course, I will be on mailing list whenever you have questions. We have also an IRC channel on Freenode, Kamailio. Sometimes I'm there, but other people can answer if I'm not around.
Yeah, so we've got one question that came in from the chat room here, and somebody noticed this, and I noticed this too. But the question is they saw the SS7_op module.
Yep.
That you have there. What is that? What is that, or how is that different or related to SIP-T?
Okay, I'm not a developer, but from what I understood, reading briefly the module is not receiving the packet as a SIP. We have this HEP support the Homer SIP capture protocol, which is like replicating SIP packets to Homer, and it's using that protocol to communicate or to inject packets into Kamailio, and then it's parsing the payload of HEP, which is SS7, into a JSON, and provides to Kamailio config file that JSON object. And based on it, you can take a decision of whatever you want to do. So practically, it's not really like routing SS7. It's why I asked to rename the module, because initially it was pushed as SS7 name. And then I say, okay, it's more related like doing some operation with SS7 and receiving them through HEP encapsulation protocol, Homer encapsulation protocol. We do have support for receiving and sending out other protocols than SIP. I already mentioned HTTP and MSRP would be another one. These are text-based, but also binary protocols. We support STAN, which is a requirement from some RFC to be able to respond to STAN requests on the SIP port. And but the developer decided to use that protocol instead of just sending directly an SS7 packet. that could be possible, but again, it was something new. I'm not an SS7 guy, and I don't see myself using it much. I was just analyzing it when it was submitted, but at this moment, I don't have more information than this one.
All right, cool. Well, Daniel, I want to say thank you for coming out today. It's been very informative, and you guys don't forget, as Daniel mentioned, check out Kamailio World. Some of the links that he had there in his presentation, we will be putting down in the notes of the video here, so you guys can find that. Go check out the Kamailio website, and as he mentioned, you guys can find him on IRC and all the various other places that Kamailio has. Next week here on ClueCon Weekly, we'll have Mr. James Bodie joining us. He's got some new stuff he's going to be talking about. I think a new venture that they're going to be unveiling here then. So don't forget to come in and join us for that. It's always interesting when we get Mr. Bodie around. Also, don't forget to click the subscribe button below this video in YouTube. You'll get the alerts when we start broadcasting these things. You'll also get the alerts on upcoming videos that way. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and all the other good fun stuff. And we'll see you guys back here next week on Wednesday at noon Central Time. Have a good one, guys.
You've been watching ClueCon Weekly. Tune in every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, or visit us online. Please follow the FreeSwitch team on Twitter and Facebook by visiting our site at freeswitch.org.